you guys. Thank you so much for joining Timewise Financial's webinar. My name is Kimani and I'm the communications manager here. Matt Atwood is a CFP professional and he has put together a really great college financial planning presentation for you guys. And so college is a big deal for not only the students, but for the parents as well. So we hope that while your child, we don't know what age they all are, but wherever it is, whatever age that they are, that this is helpful for you in terms of starting to begin thinking about planning for college, or if you're at the end and your kid is almost in college, hopefully these are just some helpful tips for you before they officially go. Thank you so much for joining us once again. There is a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. You can use that to ask any questions that you want to throughout the time of the webinar, and we will do our best to address them immediately. All right, Matt, ready to go?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kimani. So firstly, I want to talk a little bit about why we even prepared this presentation. So the college and the world of college planning has changed drastically over the last decades. And likely since you as a parent went to school, there's a much different dynamic at play today, primarily starting with cost. And so I've seen colleagues of mine, both professionally and personally, who have had to delay starting a family, delay purchasing a house, take a job they really didn't want to take, just to afford to cover the debt that was in that they accrued while they were in school. And so college choice and planning for college prudently has become more important than ever for parents and their students. So with that being said, let's jump right in. Awesome. So first we want to talk about just the cost of the modern day degree. So it's ballooned from the days of the past to be a really huge burden for students and their families. And I think back to my grandfather who attended the University of Emory in his 50s or in the 1950s and paid $125 a quarter to go to school there. And now that school is nearly $60,000 a semester. So as you can see here, a 4-year in-state school experience costs upwards on average of around $103,000. And if you chose to go out of state, it's even higher at $176,000. And all this time, while colleges have been going up, and you can see over the recent decades, they've been going up by about 8% per year, wages definitely haven't been coinciding. And in fact, the average wage of college graduates who earn those degrees have been somewhat stagnant as costs have went through the moon. So seeing the scale and the size of the cost of attending a university, it really paints a picture of why we might want to do some planning. Additionally, let's talk about the modern day college. And so nowadays, many schools have started to focus on amenities first, as opposed to the education that they're offering to their students. And just a few examples that we found in our research was the University of Virginia Tech, which has a steakhouse that serves steak and lobster on campus, an amenity made available to all of its students who are on their meal plan. And the University of Missouri, or Mizzou, has a $50 million facility that they've spent money on that has a lazy river, a spa, and it's much more akin to a resort than a learning institution. So keeping all that in mind, we have to first ask, what are we really going to college for? And really frame our mindset correctly firstly. So the primary goal of college is to learn a job or skill. So whatever career path your student has decided to go down, the main purpose of them even going to school is to learn how to do that or information on that field. Additionally, there's some real value in living on campus on your own at such a young age because you gain independence. Your parents are no longer doing your laundry or heating up your food. You're responsible for keeping your area clean as well as making sure you have clean clothes, and you gain a lot of real world experience. Additionally, while in school, you're going to meet professors and different colleagues on similar career paths as you who will maintain in your professional and social network once you graduate. And additionally, while you're living in these dorms, you're learning how to deal with others. I've heard many of horror stories about roommates and people not getting along. And in many cases, this is the first time someone's been in close quarters with another individual, and they've got to figure out one way or another how to keep the peace. And it really helps with soft skills. Additionally, through public speaking and group projects that you're going to be working on while at university, you're going to gain a lot of marketable skills for post-graduation. That being said, partying and spa treatments and a lot of the amenities you might see when you go on these tours should not be on a list of the key attractors to any school that you choose. So we want to start off by also considering, how can you start to determine the right college for you or your student? So here's some key things to consider. One, you want to think about what fields is your student interested in. They don't necessarily have to declare a major or pick exactly what they want to do for the rest of their life, but there's probably some areas of their high school that they really enjoyed, whether it be, ecology, biology, history, or, whatever, sports management, whatever that might look for like for them. And you want to look for schools that at least offer some sort of program that is compatible with your student. Additionally, and probably more importantly, is affordability. So it's easy when you see the first year sticker price of school to feel like, oh, we'll make it work. This isn't going to be an issue. But what you can run into is if you don't plan accordingly, you can create financial ruin either for you or your student, and that's not going to help them succeed while they're in school, or could potentially even shorten their time at college and force them to leave the university. And then also the location and the size of the school. So how often do you want to visit your student, or how often do they want to visit home? That's going to be important in determining how close the school is to your home. How big of a class size do you want? So some universities offer class sizes as large as 500 students. And so in that scenario, it could be a real challenge to make friends, to make personal connections with the professors and network. And so depending on your student or your own preference, you'll want to consider, hey, how big are the class sizes at the universities that we're considering? Additionally, the worst case scenario for any student or their parents is to pay money or even take out debt and get nothing in return. And this happens when students discontinue their college pursuits or drop out. And so we looked at some of the top reasons why students drop out. And one, surprisingly, is homesickness. So a lot of kids these days didn't grow up going to overnight summer camps or long trips with friends. They were a little more siloed, and they haven't spent a reasonable amount of time away from home. And now all of a sudden they're expected to spend 9 months away, excluding the holidays when they come back. And so a lot of students, especially if they have trouble fitting in right out of the gate, will just drop out and kind of not pursue college there anymore, which is a terrible outcome. Additionally, financial constraints are a huge contributor to college dropouts. So a lot of students bite off more than they can chew, or don't keep their grades up while they're there and lose any scholarships that they might have had. And then financially, they're forced to remove themselves from the institution. And then lastly, too much fun. So for many students that, this is their first taste of real freedom, where they're away from the house, they don't have the watchful eye of their parents around, and they can do whatever they want, whenever they want. And then a lot of times this leads to trouble. And you can see here, according to the data, among first-time folks going to college, folks who aren't returning after a dropout, or late education, people pursuing education later in life, nearly 50% of students attending four-year institutions at some point dropped out. And so this is a real thing to consider when you're choosing the school with you and your child. And we found some research that says the more engaged your student is in their education, either contributing to it financially or any stipulations you put upon them, the less likely they are to engage in risky habits, and less likely they are to have too much fun. So we also want to talk about, well, how are you even supposed to pay for college? And we listed these out in order of efficiency. So starting from the top is going to be the absolute most efficient way to pay for school. And then we'll get into some less efficient ways here shortly. So scholarships and grants are great ways to pay for college. The reason being is this is money your student gets, and they don't have to pay back to anyone. They didn't have to save it up. It's free money if they can qualify for it. Now, depending on your own financial situation, if you fall under certain guidelines, there's a federal Pell Grant where your student can receive up to $6,500 to go towards their school as a grant from the federal government that they will not have to pay back. Additionally, nowadays, when your student goes to apply, based on their application, there's going to be a portal where they can go ahead and start applying to some scholarships through the institution based on merit, either their test scores or their grades while in school, or even perhaps an essay. But you want to take advantage of those opportunities. And once you've exhausted those, it's time to start looking in your community at local organizations, clubs, businesses, and foundations, because these are really good opportunities. The reason being, in your community, there's going to be much less competition going after those dollars, and it's just going to be a lot more personal and a higher probability of your student actually attaining the funds. And then the last place to look is online. There are online scholarship websites like scholarships.com. These are going to be more like a lottery, though, and your probability of actually getting the funds is much lower, so we want to save those till last. The next way to pay for school, though, is via savings from a 529 or Roth IRA. And parents used to worry about, hey, if I save all this money while my child's growing up in a 529, and let's say they don't want to or don't follow a path to go to school, well, what am I going to do with those funds? And fortunately, last year, they passed a bill that allows you to just roll that over into a Roth IRA and be a starter retirement fund for your child if for some reason they didn't use all the funds, or they didn't use any of the funds because they didn't pursue a college degree. Then the next most efficient way is going to be from your income. So once your kid's enrolled in school, you might have to reallocate your budget a little bit and pull some cash from your budget, depending on how much you're looking to contribute. There's also federal work study programs on campus, and there's certain qualifications you'll have to meet. You typically have to fall under a certain household income, but if you qualify, what it allows your student to do is work on campus for, maybe something like 10 or 15 bucks an hour, but they're also going to subsidize the cost of their school since they're helping out and working on campus. Now we'll get into the less efficient ways to pay for college. And the student loan crisis has ballooned up to nearly $1.6 trillion at the moment. And students all around the country are burdened with debt. The most efficient debt they can take on, though, is going to be federal student loans. And so there's limits on the amount of loans you can take, but these federal student loans start out at $5,500 per semester. And then they go up by $1,000 per year. So if they successfully complete their freshman year, they can take $6,500 the next year. These are going to typically have the lowest interest rates because they're sponsored by the federal government, and they're the first place you want to look if and when you're having to borrow money to go to school. Now, let's say that $5,500 doesn't cover the cost of the university you chose. The next place you can look is Parent Plus loans. So it's important to note these are in the name of the parent, and the average interest rate right now is 7.54%. The parent essentially is co-signing the debt with the student, but if the student doesn't pay, the parent's going to have to step in and make up the difference. But we've seen some families that make a formal agreement with one another. Hey, I'll do this so that you can go to that school, but once you get out of school, you're going to have to pay this back. But it's important for the parent signs the dotted line that they know, hey, worst comes to worst, I'm on the hook for this money. The next place would be a home equity loan. So we don't want to go taking from our retirement yet or borrowing money at high interest rates. This is going to be the next most efficient place to pull money from if you're getting ready to pay for school. And you can see the market rate right now is around 8 to 9%. So pretty high interest, and you're taking equity out of your home, but you're not robbing from your retirement or paying exuberant interest like in the following two options. So you can take money out of your retirement. You can either do a 401k loan. So this, you're just paying interest back to yourself. There's no penalties or anything like that. Or for IRAs, you could take out money from your IRAs penalty-free for your child's expenses. But we're now putting your own retirement at risk to provide for this child. And if we're not careful, we're going to essentially kind of rob Peter to pay Paul, because if you're underprepared for retirement, then that could mean at some point your kid has to step in and take care of you in some shape or fashion, whether that's having you come live with them, helping you fund any long-term care expenses. And we don't want to create a problem for ourselves at the expense of a college education. And then lastly, the least efficient place you want to look for if you've exhausted all these other options is private student loans. And these are non-collateralized, so there's nothing they can come after. They're through private banks, and they typically have really high interest rates. And another thing is, just like with the student loan forbearance that we've seen over during the pandemic, any sort of favorable repayment plans or interest pauses won't apply to these loans. You'll have to pay them off based on the terms you agree upon, with no real, I guess you could say, lax or relaxation or ability to help you out in a time of need. So as you're starting to prepare for college, there's going to be a form while you're preparing and while your kid's in school, you're going to become very familiar with, and it's called the FAFSA form. And all this form is really a form that's used to calculate your EFC, which we'll talk about in a moment, and determine how much, based on your income, should you as a family be able to contribute to your child's school, and then how much should the federal government fill in the difference. And it's going to take into account a number of different factors, but income, you as a parent's income, is the largest factor. And they're going to use this data to calculate your EFC. So your FAFSA is going to be dependent upon 2 years back. It's going to have a 2-year look back. So when your kid's in their junior year, that year of your income is going to be considered for their freshman year. And these forms are typically due by June 1st, but it's important, especially with the Pell Grant and even the loans, to note that this money is allocated on a first come, first served basis, and there's an approved budget every single year. And so you don't want to be the last in line to complete this form. You want to make sure you get it done in a timely manner. Typically opens up around October, November of your child's senior year in high school, and you do not have to have decided where you're going to school to fill out this form. That being said, they're going to use this form to calculate your expected family contribution. So this is exactly as it sounds. They don't really care if you're living paycheck to paycheck or if you got a bunch of debt. They're just going to calculate based on your current income and a few other factors we'll look at in a second. Here's how much you should be, in our eyes, able to contribute towards your child's school. And you can see here what's used from that FAFSA form to calculate that number. So money in the student's name is calculated at a much higher rate than money in the parent's name. So 50% of students' income, and depending on your income, anywhere from only 22% to 47%. So let's talk in a little greater detail, though, about what kind of assets are included in the equation. So these are the ones that, if we could have a perfect world, we would want to keep to a minimum at all possible. So after-tax money in general. So this is things like checking and savings accounts, 529 set up by the parents, any after-tax investment accounts or second homes, vacation homes, or investment property, stock options, pretty much any money that's after tax. But there's plenty of assets that are not included in the equation, and these are the better place to start parking your money. Now, we have to use some forethought here, because remember, you're applying from data 2 years ago on your income. So once you get into that senior year, you can't really do anything to minimize your income. The assets you can play around with, that's more of a real-time snapshot, but there's some planning that needs to go on here if you want to maximize the amount of aid you're going to receive. So things that are not included though are pretty much pre-tax money. Things like retirement accounts, your 401k at work or IRAs, health savings accounts, even life insurance, and the cash value of life insurance is not included in this equation. And 529s that aren't owned by the parents, but the grandparents, those aren't included in the equation. Your primary residence and the equity in your home, not included in the equation. So these are all areas that if we can bolster leading up to our kids going to school, instead of having a bunch of after-tax money, it will go to really help us out in maximizing the aid our student receives. So here's a few tricks of the trade. Some of these may be applicable for you, some of them may not. But in those years leading up, we want to minimize our after-tax money. So if we can contribute as much as possible to retirement accounts to limit the amount of regular assets, that would be a huge win. And remember, worst case scenario, we can touch those penalty-free to pay for higher ed expenses. Also, we want to make, if you have the ability, say you're a small business owner or something like that, and you can keep more money in the business, or maybe you were considering a sabbatical or something like that, you just want to do everything you can to reduce your income for the 2 years before your child attends college. You can use your regular money that maybe you got some money in after-tax accounts to also pay down your mortgage. Remember that primary residence is not included in the equation. If you also had a bunch of cash sitting on the sidelines, things like jewelry, artwork, any collectibles that are not going to heavily depreciate, would actually sort of be an investment, are a great place to park money because they're not really going to be included in that equation. As we pointed out, also, if you have a good relationship either with your parents or your spouse's parents, you could set up the 529 in the name of the grandparent, and then it's not even considered at all for the equation. So it's a really unique way to save for college, but also not get punished when you go to apply for federal aid. We also, in those years leading up, don't want to be realizing a bunch of capital gains on the sale of an investment property or sale of stock in an after-tax account, because that's going to further make you look like you make a lot more money. And then there's a few other ways here you can see to keep money off the books, if you would. Additionally, here in the state of Georgia, and most states have a program like this of some sort. Different states have different qualifications and different programs, but all are designed ideally to incentivize students who live in that state to go to school in that state and hopefully graduate and stay in that state and be productive members of that state. Here in the state of Georgia, we have the Hope Scholarship, and there used to be a two-tier system where you had the General Hope Scholarship as well as Zell Miller. That, as of March of this year, has since been eliminated. So we don't even need to cover what it takes to get Zell Miller, because now you just need to have a 3.0 or higher while you're in high school to get Hope. And Hope going forward now pays 100% of college tuition. Now, it's important to remember, though, this is just tuition. This is not the room, the board, the meal plan, the fees, or the books. And it does all this now without a test score requirement. So this is a huge windfall for students who may not have had the test score or the GPA of 3.7 that used to be in place for Zell Miller. So we wanted to do a case study to kind of walk through what should be going through your head as you're declaring where you want to go to school. And so we started with this young lady, Jenny the Tiger fan. So Jenny's from Woodstock, Georgia, and she, in this case, she's graduating this year. She's a star student. She has a 3.72 GPA, a well-developed resume, and she's been a Clemson fan since the days she can remember. Always watched every single football game, and from when she was young said that's where she was going to go to school. She plans on studying marketing, wherever she goes. And her family is middle class. You know, they have a household income of around $100,000, and she has a little brother that they're going to have to pay for as well. Her parents are living paycheck to paycheck. There's not a bunch of extra money in their budget, but they did set up a 529 for her with around $40,000 in it. So first, let's just analyze the costs of the two institutions. So for a non-South Carolina resident, Jenny's here in Woodstock, so University of Clemson per year is going to cost her around $52,000. And based on all that data we just went through with her family situation, we set her family's paycheck to paycheck, but the government says based on their income and their assets, they should be able to contribute at least $12,777 per year to go towards her school. They won't be able to do that full amount, unfortunately, but they'll be able to do near that thanks to their 529. So you can see here, she would pay out of pocket $52,000 for Clemson. But when we look at Georgia, well, Hope allows Jimmy to basically eliminate this tuition piece. She doesn't have to worry about that. Hope's going to pick up that bill. And she's just responsible for the remaining 16 grand or so between all the housing, food, books, and miscellaneous living expenses that she's anticipated to spend. So there's a tough decision here. These are the things Jenny's going to have to consider. So at UGA, Jenny would have $16,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. Her parents said they would be able to provide 10 grand a year thanks to their 529 they had set aside from her. So the remaining 6 grand, she can take all of with those really efficient, when it comes to the debt side of things, federal student loans at 4.99%. This would mean after 4 years, she would graduate with $24,000 in student debt, which relatively isn't that bad. And her monthly payment out of school, if she just went on the standard repayment plan, which is 10 years, would be $254 a month, which based on her degree of marketing should be really feasible. Now, it's important to also point out, though, this does not account for personal expenses like Jenny's new clothes, gas to get wherever she's going, trips on spring break, or eating out with friends. And in this case, it may be recommended that Jenny pick up a job for those items. Now, Clemson's stark in comparison. There, she would have $52,000 in out-of-pocket expenses. Now, fortunately, her parents would still provide that 10 grand. She would still have access to that 6 grand from federal student loans. And then maybe she arranges with her parents to take out those Parent Plus loans for the remaining balance, of which she tells them, I'll pay you once I graduate. In this case, she would graduate with the same $24,000 in federal student debt, but she'd also have an additional $144,000 in Parent Plus loans. And the combined monthly payment on those notes would be $1,966 a month. That's life-changing. This is the difference between Jenny having to live in a ratty apartment with less than desirable roommates to make ends meet, or her being able to start out on her trajectory on her feet based on her college choice. So she's got a lot to consider here. So in this case, as much as a fan of Clemson as Jenny is, it's just too much of a deal that we have here in the state of Georgia by covering all that tuition. And we also looked, and based on her degree path of marketing, UGA is number 17 in the country and Clemson's only 25. So she's actually getting a better education for much less of the price. And with these savings of nearly $144,000, you know, Jenny could go get season tickets in a box each season at Clemson's home games and still come out ahead. Now, let's talk about a little more relevant information, perhaps more of a timeline. When should you guys start planning? What should you be doing in those years leading up to college? It's important to point out, once your student graduates middle school, it all starts to get real. From 9th to 12th grade, the grades that are on that report card matter more than ever, and they're going to be considered when they start to apply for college. But additionally, when we really start to have to plan is in the junior year. So in fall, we recommend you and your students sit down, and you don't need to have any input here. This is just initially a fishing expedition just to see, hey, where did they have in mind going to school, and build out a list of what they are interested in, what schools they might want to go to, and what they might want to study. And in that fall semester, or especially in the junior year, be sure to go visit these schools and go online before you visit these schools and calculate your personal EFC. The reason being is we recommend while you're on campus at that school, once the tour is over and you've seen the pool, the gym, everything but a classroom, we recommend you step away and go to the financial aid office. And if you go there, initially they're going to say, it's a moving scale. It depends on your personal situation. We're not really able to give you a good estimate of how much it would cost you. But if you go in there and say, hey, we've already calculated our expected family contribution, it's going to be this. Here's her GPA, here's her test score, or whatever information you have. Can you at least give us a ballpark? They'll really be able to get down almost to the dollar of how much that education is going to cost. And have the student in the room there with you to hear these numbers, because there's going to be a huge differential between different schools. Additionally, in the fall of junior year, we recommend going in blind to the SAT the first time that you take it. Just get that test anxiety out of the way, or the ACT, whichever your student chooses, and learn how the test works and kind of get comfortable with it. Then, while in the fall of the senior year, have your child, or preferably maybe even the summer leading up to it, have them take an SAT or ACT prep course. It's well worth the investment to really get them prepared, not only on what's on the test, but how the questions are asked. And then in that fall, they're going to take a real honest stab at this test and this is the test score they want to have submitted to the universities. Additionally, this is when the fall of senior year is when you're going to start looking at scholarships at all those places we mentioned before. Christmas break is a great time to knock this stuff out because the kid doesn't have much going on. Additionally, in that October to February range, we recommend that you start filling out your FAFSA form. And then there's two levels of college application. There's early action and then traditional application. And so early action is usually due by like the 1st of December, or even as early as November. And in this case, these are the students when you apply that are just a slam dunk. The school is saying, wow, this candidate is amazing. I know even with all the other applications coming in after early action, we're not going to find a rock star like this. Please come to our university. And they'll either get accepted, rejected, or deferred to regular decision based on that application. Or you can wait until just regular applications. And those are typically due in March. We recommend you apply to 2 or 3 schools at least, and have one stretch school that may be a challenge to get into, and then 1 or 2 fallback schools that'll be more of a slam dunk in case that one doesn't work out, because you can always transfer from that smaller school to the stretch school if necessary, and it's much easier to transfer into a school than it is to get accepted as a freshman. Now, these decisions are typically received in March. So by March, you'll hear back from the schools you applied to, and you'll have to make a decision by May 1st. So I think I misspoke earlier, say regular actions due in March. No, it's typically due Jan 1, and you hear back by March. Now, what are these colleges even looking for? Times have changed quite a bit since you guys might have went to school, even myself, and they have a much more competitive atmosphere going into these schools. And we kind of listed these from most important to least. So firstly, obviously, is the coursework at school. How did your student perform? What was their GPA and how did they do on their test scores? Now, it's important to point out that they really want to see that student take advantage of these AP or dual enrollment opportunities. And they really weight that based on how many opportunities were available to that student. So, for example, let's say there's a student in Vidalia, Georgia, who goes to a small high school down in the middle of nowhere. And at that school, there's only 6 available AP courses, and that student took 5 of them. That's going to be really highly regarded by that university because they maximize the opportunities available to them, as opposed to a student maybe here at school at Lassiter or a local bigger school here in the Woodstock area who had maybe 30 different AP courses available to them, If they only take 5 or even 6 or 7, the school's going to wonder, why didn't you take more opportunities that were available to you while you were in school? Additionally, these more rigorous classes are going to go to boost your student's GPA, because an A plus in a regular math class versus AP Calc is weighted differently in the eyes of the institutions. They give an extra 0.5 to a full point based on whichever course they're in. So additionally, they're going to look at extracurriculars. So they just don't want bookworms coming to their university. They want a well-rounded person who's involved in their school, who's going to be a great representative of their university once they graduate. So this doesn't necessarily have to be sports. It can be student organizations, band, whatever it is, but it's an obligation outside of just going to school. Also, these essays are highly regarded, and they really want to see some good writing, and they want to see some passion in these essays. Why is your student even interested in coming to this university, and why do they want to study whatever major they're initially declaring in the first place? And you can see here in the bottom right, a university like University of Georgia is actually pretty rigorous. The average student has around 8 to 13 AP or dual enrollment courses, and a highly competitive ACT or SAT test score with a GPA above 4.0, because they were taking advantage of those AP or dual enrollment courses. So these 4 years, if you want to get into that good school, are the absolute most important. And then lastly, reach into your network. Letters of a recommendation go a long way as well. This could come from a teacher at the student school, a boss they had at a high school job, a local notable alumni that's a friend of the family. But don't be afraid to reach out and ask for those letters of recommendation. So let's talk about some tips on saving for college once your student's actually there. So the first, at least as of now, is a website called Slugbooks. And what this website is, an aggregator, and you just type in what's called the ISBN, or just the code for the particular textbook, and it goes out to 10 or 12 different websites and finds that the cheapest option on each website, and then you can pick the absolute cheapest option. And we always recommend renting textbooks. I can say I've never met a professional who utilizes their textbooks from college frequently, especially for their initial classes that they're taking. And so there's no reason to buy these textbooks, and especially not at the bookstore where they'll be marked up, a ton. Additionally, most schools are going to have stipulations for the first or even first and second year of how long they want their students to live on campus. And this is to promote a successful education. It's not a money grab. It's just they found by being involved on campus and kind of being forced to be on campus, the student doesn't get as siloed, and it makes for a more, successful education. But once able, it oftentimes makes sense to move off campus and live with roommates. You're not necessarily going to save much on the room or the actual, dorm room versus an apartment off campus, but where you really will save is on the meal plan. So meal plans typically charge for 21 meals a week or 3 meals a day. And your student with a busy schedule or going out with friends isn't going to take advantage of nearly that many. And so these meal plans come in at like $13 to $18 a meal. They're really expensive. And so we encourage, this is an area where you can really save on the cost of going to school, but most schools force you to have the meal plan if you live on campus. So moving off campus can be a great way to save. Additionally, most schools have a stipulation that if you live within 50 miles of the campus, you don't have to follow those rules for living on campus the first year or the second year. So perhaps you have a family member, there's some loopholes here to be had, or maybe you even live within 50 miles of the school. They still can go get a college style living arrangement at a apartment right off campus, or whatever that may look like, and save a ton of money. Lastly, is the coursework while they're in high school. So dual enrollment, AP and IB classes aren't only a great way to set yourself apart on the application, you can save tons of money. So I can even speak from my own experience. I did a handful. I didn't, pursue it to the highest degree of dual enrollment courses and AP classes while I was in college, or pardon me, high school, but I came out of school with nearly a year of college already knocked out. That was a year I didn't have to pay for once I got into school. Now we have found that dual enrollment are the best to take because colleges don't, I guess, discriminate too greatly between AP and dual enrollment. And it's much easier to get an A in a multi-semester course than it is to perform really well on a rigorous AP exam. And so we apply preferential treatment to dual enrollment first, but you want to throw some APs in there as well, but maximize that dual enrollment to the most of your ability. Ideally, you should not be taking many courses your senior year outside of electives or just fun courses at the high school because you want to be maximizing time in those dual enrollment experiences, therefore saving you money once you go to school. So also it's recommended that as your student gets in their junior or senior year, we need to set clear boundaries and expectations for that student. You or you and your spouse or whatever that looks like need to get together first and discuss, after reviewing your budget, what exactly are we comfortable contributing to their education? And this could even come, before you start touring schools, that you set these expectations. But if you don't, you're leaving your student in the blind. They have no idea what they can afford, if and when they'll be able to go to that school. And so come up with that budget and sit your student down in a serious manner and say, hey, we really want you to succeed in school. We really want to see you do well, but this is what we need to keep this household going on. And this is what we are able to contribute toward your school, whatever that number is, and let them know no matter where they decide to go to school, whether it's Pepperdine University or, some, North Georgia Technical College, they are responsible for any difference over that number. And it'll have a much more, I guess, desirable outcome for you because then, for one, you won't be getting these calls, while they're in school, hey, I ran out of money or something like that. You'll have they'll have a much more clear picture, and it also force them to budget. That being said, so we at Timewise build comprehensive financial plans for education planning. So whether your kid's 18 or 3, we can start to build a plan for you and determine, hey, how much do you need to save? If you're already saving, are you saving enough? And how much is school expected to be once your child is ready to go to school? This is an important piece you want to plan for because alternatively, it could create financial ruin for you or your student. And we have a team of CFPs here that not only will review your plan and determine are you prepared for college, but also see how it would reflect upon your own retirement goals and determine if you go and proceed with this plan, are you kind of putting yourself at risk of not having a successful retirement. So don't hesitate to reach out to us via email or give us a shout, and we can set up a complimentary phone call or Zoom consultation so we can determine if you're prepared for your student's college. That being said, these disclosures are just to make sure the presentation is compliant, but if there's any questions, we can take those now. Let's see.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. I think you did such a good job covering a variety of areas for people, and we hope that this was extremely helpful for you all. We know it was a lot of information, so we are planning on sending a replay out so you guys can watch it again or maybe even watch it with your child to help them as they're going through the eventual college planning process. So thank you so much. We so appreciate your time. And there is a final poll that is there. And so I hope that you guys it looks like a lot of people got really good information and you guys are really excited to get serious about college planning. So we love to hear that. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.